Hello and welcome, Carrot community. Travis here with another video for Engineers Daily Carry. Today I got a disassembly and maintenance video for you on this Benchmade Impel. Recently got this one just about a week or so ago. Knife that's been out quite some time. Of course, the first thing I did when I got it was wanted to take it apart and see how it functioned. Clean it up, oil it, and put it back together. Took to YouTube to see how daunting of a task I had ahead of myself and found there was not any predominant disassembly and maintenance videos on the Impel, so decided I'd put this one together for the channel. So appreciate you guys tuning in, and this will be the second time I've taken it apart. The first time was not, it went fine, but it wasn't what I would call a pleasant experience. So not something I'm tickled about going through and doing again. If you don't already, check out the Instagram page over at Engineers Daily Carry, and I have a kind of blown apart view of all the parts and pieces and components that go into this small little 2-inch knife. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the disassembly. The outside body screws here are T6s. So we can just start probably with the easiest component, which is these G10 outer liners that fit over the aluminum machined body parts, the handle scales here, the predominant handle scales. Maybe I can get these taken out. Try to leave those together a bit. And you can see under here, these next body screws, I believe, were T5s. Check those out in a second. Pop the pocket clip off of this guy. More T6s for the pocket clip. I guess initial first impressions on the Impel. So I have two other sub 2-inch autos as well. The ProTech Sprint and the ProTech Calmigo. This and kind of looks like it with the G10 off and the pocket clip off, but this is very similar to the ProTech Sprint in dimensions and blade shape and grind. I've only carried this one day, but I found myself liking the Sprint better so far after a very small sample size. The action on this is good, but the action on the Sprint is just a little bit better, in my opinion. And the factory edge on the Sprint from ProTech I found to be a little bit better. And then it has the ProTech pocket clip, which is very hard to beat. Do really like the ProTech pocket clips. So this one here I think was also a T, let's try a T4. It is a, nope, they are T5s. So that's the stop pin. We'll just loosen that up for now. Flip it over here. Loosen up the back spacer. Screws, which you can see the assembly on here. It doesn't really have standoffs. It's got both the handle scales are machined in a way that they meet together with that. And then it's got these, I guess machined receivers to the screws here that fit into these keyed openings. What I found on the first disassembly was that those are not directly interchangeable. I had trouble getting one of them to seat in there properly, and then I swapped them around and found things went smoothly from that point. So do try to keep track when you take apart exactly which hole these came out of to get them back in the identical hole. And I'm holding some down pressure here as I pull these apart, get all the think I'm spinning on this one. Hold the back side here. I'm still continuing to hold those handle scales together too tightly, so I don't end up in a position, I'm gonna distinguish those as I talk about, so I don't end up in a position that this spring tension on this fires this apart. I want a controlled opportunity, there we go, to flip this open and take it apart. And that's what I was talking about. Can't see off camera, but I am wearing safety glasses. Something I like to do for not all disassemblies, but for auto disassemblies for sure. So all that was not the main firing spring. That's the button lock spring right here. I just had this apart a couple days ago, so I had a nice coat of oil on it. Now I'm getting it on my hands, but this is just the button lock spring here with the button lock, and something to pay attention to when you take it apart, put it back together. The button lock is keyed in such a way also, it's got this, let's see if I can get this on camera real good and get a good hold on it, but it's, come on, focus. It's cut in such a way that's obviously where your blade passes through for the button lock, but it's also, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get it, but there's a flat spot cut on the top side of this that you need to, see if I can get it to focus. You need to pay some attention to, because it'll only fit in there one way with that exactly seated. I had a little bit of trouble getting that to seat in there just right on the last disassembly. So this is that stop pin I referenced earlier, and it should just come out of there now. That's the actual firing spring that, you know, pulls it open, and here are those pins. And I'm going to try to again distinguish that, keep them organized here on which one went in which hole. My way of doing this is recognize that the knife's going this way, and then these go in the front hole, those go in the back hole. And we'll finish taking this screw out here. Keep the stop pin from spinning. This goes with the stop pin. Okay, and then I left that together last time, and I did take apart, you can also take apart, I wanted to clean under it and lubricate it. Not much of one to use the safeties on the autos. I've been carrying autos a while now and have never had anything close to a misfire or accidental fire. At least the ones I carry are all of the nature you have to be extremely deliberate in your pressing of the button or actuating the mechanism to make them fire. So I've never felt compelled to use the safeties on them, but I did in playing around with this one. The safety was a little gritty and kind of felt a little loose, and you can adjust that back here on the tension on that screw that we just took apart. So we'll go ahead and clean up a little bit on this now. Not much to clean up other than the Loctite from the last assembly and disassembly and reassembly that I just did a couple days ago, but just kind of show you what I did as far as cleanup on it. You know, general regular knife maintenance and cleanup, right? So just some isopropyl alcohol on a little, these are little gun cleaning swatches that pull double duty for me, and have a lot of these on hand for, you know, cleaning out barrels of rifles and pistols, as well as doing some knife cleanup. They're nice because they're lint free. They won't leave anything behind on the scales here, or anything else that you choose to wipe down. So those are, like I said, pretty clean. Just had it apart a couple days ago and had 1 day of pocket time, so don't intend to clean it for every day of its life, but it's getting it this time. And then I did clean the back of these G10 liners. They have a little bit of staining to them. Wipe them up, and some of that Loctite's coming off there now. I didn't keep this close of tabs on the body screws last time, and I found they went together just fine. So I wouldn't represent that as something that's critical to do, but it is something I'm just doing this time. So then also it's got some kind of body cavities on it, so I take some alcohol and get it off the wipe here, get it onto a Q-tip and clean up all the little recesses and different parts too. Factory oil or prior gum up or something, there was a little bit of residue down in the crevices when I got this. So last time I took it apart, I did, there's something down in there now. I did use a pointed wooden dowel to really get in all these fine machine angles and parts to get a very detailed and strong clean on there. Get that cleaned out. Probably take a minute here to talk about the assembly. So nothing overly surprising, but as you can see, a lot of little parts and pieces for such a small knife. The assembly, we talked about the way the back spacers meet up. It's just these aluminum scales with the G10 inlays over top, non-deep carry pocket clip. You can see it doesn't have any kind of washers. The blade steel rides directly on the aluminum of the handle scales here. Pretty common for autos. Most of my Protects are the same way. They don't have any washers or any Teflon or anything like that. They or any bearings. They just ride directly on there. You don't need a super silky smooth action on an auto. The spring is very strong for its stature and has no issue firing the blade open. So just one less component, one less thing to clean, one less thing to worry about gumming up or having issues, I suppose. So now that we got it all the way apart, wiped down a little bit relative to its recent cleaning, I go ahead and start the reassembly process here. So for reassembly, what I use is the KPL knife pivot lube and then the Loctite on a stick. So let's go ahead and redo some of this lubrication that I just cleaned up and wiped off here. And I am probably to a fault, I lubricate very heavily. I'm not one that gets my knives very dirty, which I know is one of the potential downsides of lubricating heavily. It'll be more prone to collect dirt where that lube is, but not found that to be an issue ever for me. So I like to keep them lubed very well so that I get as good of an action as that knife can possibly deliver. So right now I'm putting some lubrication on both the rubbing surfaces on here where the blade slides back and forth, just throwing some down in where the button lock sits as well as down in where the spring sits. So this is the auto spring. It's got this tail on it here, and that tail, make sure the blade side's up, which is where it's nosed up, and the tail goes down in that slot just like so. And then from there we'll go ahead and put back in our stop pin next. So the stop pin, I didn't find there was any magical direction that it fits in there. Just toss it in there. Go ahead and put the little screw, still got some old Loctite on there. I'll try to clean some of that off. Go ahead and put it in from the other side. I'll go ahead and put a little tiny dab, such a small screw here, just not much of nothing. Little tiny dab of some fresh Loctite on there. And you're gonna have to use your finger to hold a lot of back pressure on that stop pin to keep it from spinning as you're threading that in. once we got it in, whoops, and of course I lose the spring here again. Get it back where it belongs. All right, the next one to probably put back in is move this stuff off to the side, is your safety slide mechanism here. So it's a few pieces, and this piece here actually rides in this little groove or channel here. So that is again, I lubricate everything, but this is another point that I put some KPL lube on there, and then this just, if you keep it back so those ears fit in the opening, this just goes right back here, and then you can click it right down in there. So just like so. Now it'll kind of hold itself in there, and you can flip it over. And likewise, again, I like to lubricate, so put a little dab around where this lock button slides. It fits in one way, so you get it back in that angle. Put your finger on it, flip it back over, and now you got to kind of line up. It's not super tricky, but it is a little tricky. You got to line back up this hole, and then due to the limitation of only having 2 hands, you'll have to get your screw on here. Get you just a little dab of Loctite on there, and then thread that in from the back. Okay. I'm gonna be real careful. That little tiny screw there wants to cross thread really easily. So now I tightened that up a lot, and I can't move the lock button at all. So that's the way I like to do it, is drive it down to not where you're gonna strip out the head of the screw, but just nice and snug, that you know you got it well seated, and then back off just a touch and actuate that safety a few times. It's a little looser than I want, so I'm gonna try to snug it just a touch, kind of dialing in how much resistance you want on that lock button, or that lock slide there rather. So I think that's pretty good, pretty satisfied with that. Like I said, when I got this, the button was kind of rattly and loose and just kind of flopped back and forth way too easily for my preference. So after that first cleaning, it's one of the significant improvements was what the level of resistance and how that actuated on there. So now I'm happy with that. We got that how we want it. We'll go ahead and put that aside. I'll stab myself with the top of the KPL bottle. We will now move on to the least fun portion of this disassembly and reassembly process. So this takes a little finesse. You gotta pull this scale back in here. So I already put some lubrication down in the button lock there. It's looking a little dry, put a little more on here. Then got this little spring, the one that fired out at my face earlier. Put it down in here. And then your button lock, this gets a little tricky. It does rub against your blade, so I just put one little drop of oil on there, and a little drop around the edge here where it rubs on the inside of that channel, and then start by trying to get it lined up in a way that looks like it'll work. And that's with the opening down towards the blade. And so now you're going to want to take your blade, and I'm realizing now the mistakes I have made. I think last time I did the same thing. I want to take this stop pin back off. So there you go, learn from my mistakes. Don't put the stop pin on first. Start with the blade and leave the stop pin out to give yourself enough freedom there. Line up that hole in the blade with the hole in the spring there, with the pin in the spring. Now you gotta kind of play with the blade. Pull it out on the, what I found worked best last time is you pull it out on the, well, not that much. Pull it out on the pivot as much as you can. Get those holes lined up, those channels lined up there. And then you got to get this spring down in there, get your button lock lined up. I apologize if I'm not getting exactly the right angle here because this is very tricky. Then you got to kind of pull the blade back and forth and try to wiggle the lock around it. Okay, so we got it. That went far smoother than last time. Okay, so it's down on there. Okay, so now you see what I'm doing here. Trying to get that down. All right. Hold down pressure on the blade. I turned the blade now so that this rounded portion of the blade stock will hold that pin in. If you don't, you go back to this half crescent moon shape here, that pin's going to come firing out just like it did last time, and then you're going to be back at square one trying to dance it back in there. So now, the next portion of our operation here, now we'll put the stop pin back in. Okay. With the stop pin back in, we are going to attempt, this proved challenging last time, to get this handle scale to seat back on there. I'm going to let the blade come up. So I want to see if that button comes through, and it did. Wow, we got very lucky that time. So last time, let me kind of pinch it here real hard and show you what I'm talking about. So that you need that button to pop through this hole here. And last time, like I showed you, or attempted to show you earlier, there's a flat portion to that button and it needs to be lined up just right so that it actually fits in the channel and the machining back there and pops back through. I had to dance the blade back and forth, and I had to take a driver and turn it back and forth a little bit until it finally wiggled its way through there, but that went pretty well this time. So I'm gonna stop yakking and try to capitalize on that by getting my T6 driver back up here. Those others were T5. I don't remember if I definitively answered that for you or not. Okay, a little Loctite on the pivot. I'm going to drive the pivot down, not drive it home, but tight enough that it's going to keep this whole assembly from flying back apart on me. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. Now, roll it over to the other side, and let's go ahead, while we can, go back to our T5 driver again. And take our small stop pin screw, way too much Loctite. Get just a tiny bit of Loctite on it. Get it going in there again. Very tiny screw, so be very careful not to get it cross-threaded like it's wanting to do right now. Come on. Work with me here. Well, what's the problem? Try this again, see if, should only line up one way in there. not wanting to go in its home though. Go in your home. It's starting to get concerned. All right. Another learning for everyone. I may have lied to you. It appears as though that stop pin I previously just got very lucky on. It must not be unidirectional, or I don't have it seated in there correctly, one of the two. So we're gonna have to go back in now, and the real fun begins. We were past the most difficult part. Now we're going back into the most difficult part. I'm gonna turn the blade again, try to hold that pin exactly where it is. I'm gonna pull this stop pin out. I'm gonna flip it around, see if this solves our issue here. Very teensy tiny to get a hold of. Okay. Tap that home just a little bit. Okay. And while I'm in here, I'm recalling I did not relubricate this side of the knife, so I'll take advantage of that opportunity now. And I will try to ever so carefully dance that back together. All right. I think we got it there. We're almost back to where we once were. Get the Loctite back on the pivot screw. Drive it, and you don't want to leave it super loose. I mean, you don't have to crank on it, but you want to get it nice and snug so that it doesn't leave you susceptible to this flying open on you again. We'll switch drivers here again. And we're going to reattempt all right, and it's in. Well, don't know what if it wasn't quite seated right, or if it was truly flip direction, but something to watch out for on the stop pin there. So I loosened that up just a little bit because I could see that these handle scales were just a little out of alignment. So this next part, we're almost past the difficult parts. That was probably the most difficult part. I'm gonna go back to T5 for these backspacer screws. This next part, remember we were deliberate about keeping track of which hole these came out of. I think these probably should be interchangeable, but I found that mine just were not quite. They did not want to go in the opposite hole of what they came out of. So I got that one in there nice and snug. Go ahead and do the other one. Falls right in there. All right, keep that there, hold it flat. Get our other screws here. Lined up, started, a little Loctite on them. Snug them up. Again, my process for doing backspacer screws along with pivot is not to really hammer anything home until the very end. Just get everything nice and snug. Sorry about that. Somebody outside is warming up their tires, I guess. All right. So now I like to kind of back off a little bit now that we got everything in, and then retighten a little bit just to make sure everything seats nice and comfortably. We'll get the pivot screw here too. The same thing on it. Back off on it a little bit and then retighten it a little bit. Okay. Now, I did find that you can crank on this so tight that it will impede the action, so I want about as tight as it'll be without, like I can feel right there it's dragging real hard, and it's a grind to get it closed, so back off a little bit, and that's it right there. It's just, I can feel I'm only pushing against the tension of that spring to close it, and fire's open nice and hard, so we're dialed in there. Happy with that. So that's that. We'll move back to the T6 body screws here. Still got a little leftover Loctite on them, and not overly concerned that these are gonna unsnug on me. So I'm not gonna re-Loctite these, but go ahead and get these put back on here. Same thing on the other side. T6 is on these screws again. Got those down. And then one set left, your pocket clip. So those, I'm gonna take them out of the pocket clip. I'm gonna grab them home on the pocket clip and try to just get a little touch of Loctite on each of them while they sit in the pocket clip. Good. Get this lined up just so. And then get them both started, obviously, before you tighten either one down much. And they go in there pretty smoothly. It snuggles up pretty good. Make sure you Loctite those, because they will try to back out with a little bit of pressure from your regular in and out of pocket activities. A little bit of squeeze through on the Loctite there, wipe that off. And wipe up these final items there. And there you have it. The disassembly, maintenance, and reassembly of the Benchmade Impel. It is still not something that I would say, hey, if you're feeling stressed and looking for a nice, relaxing activity, go ahead and take apart your Impel and clean it up and put it back together. It will not meet that. It will undoubtedly leave you just frustrated further coming away dealing with these multitude of tiny little parts and springs and everything else. But it is of the nature that if like me, you find your lock was not quite performing how you'd like, it wasn't as tight as you like, it was loose, it was vibrating, or you get a lot of dirt down in there and you need to clean it up and actually perform cleaning and maintenance on it. Now you've seen how to do it. It isn't overly daunting. It is something you're capable of, so feel free to get in there and do it, and I hope this helps. I hope you learn some tips and tricks and lessons from watching me do it. And please comment below if you have any questions or concerns or issues, and enjoy engaging with everybody, and thanks for watching the video.